Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Masaklas Yevamot daf Yud Ches. We are going to begin on Yud Ches about Aleph, about 7 lines from the top, with the question Mesav Rab Huna Barchia. So he asked the following questions we're going to see, and we're in the middle of a discussion whether or not we hold Yesh Zika or Ein Zika. What exactly is this connection that this Shomeres Yavim has, this woman whose husband died and they were childless? What is this connection to this brother? Do we say that the Zika is so strong that because of that, the question is, even if the mother even if she would die, that he would then still be ushered to his mother, to her mother, because of Chamaisel, because like a mother-in-law. Now, he never married her; she died. So, if you hold Yesh Zika, perhaps it's so strong that even though you didn't do anything, the fact that she dies, you're still not allowed to marry the mother. If you hold Ein Zika, then it's mutter. So now we continue with this thought process. Also, b'maimer mace. So we mentioned in our Mishnah that, let's say again, you have Reuven, brother one, who dies, and then Shimon is the brother. Now, instead of doing Yibum, he instead does Maimer, which is a Kedusha de Rabbanan. So she was not entirely married to him. Umace, and then he dies, and Shimon dies. Now the question is, what's the deal with the third brother, Levi? So the din is that the second brother will at least do chalitza, but he doesn't do yibum. Now, why does he have to do chalitza? Because even though it's true that the woman who was Reuven's wife was became a Yevamot after Reuven, of course, died, while Levi was not yet born. So because of that, it's shul hayabalamo. So that's considered like a din ereva. It has to be yachtav. They have to have been alive at the same time. And since Reuben and Levi were not, so therefore she is someone that Levi will not take. So the question is, so then why would, if it's true, it's a tsaras ereva? But because the kedushin was only to Rabbanan, so it's not really a case of tsaras ereva, because Shimon was really not married to her. It was only a kedusha to Rabbanan of Maimer. So therefore chalitza must be done. Now, Taima, but Maimer. The only reason why we say this is because at least Shimon did Maimer. Maimer. If let's say he did nothing, she was just zokuk to her as a Shemer Shabam, Shnei Nam Yibum Yavma. He would even be able to do Yibum. Now, if you hold that there's an element of Zika, then Havilat Saras Eshasachar Shalhaiba Lamo Bezika. So, L'chaira, how could you say that he would be able to do Yibum? L'chor, that's the diak though. That because he did Maimer, so it's at least there's some element of some connection of this Ereva, and therefore the Tsaras Ereva, you don't do Yibum, which is mashma. If he didn't do anything, so then the guy could even do Yibum. Levi could even do Yibum on her, which is l'chor a proof of Ein Zika. Because if you hold Yesh Zika, how can you be allowed to do it? So Marabo, no, who didn't the Afghan Deloy of it but Maimer? So it's according to the Shita of Ein Zika, you're right, you would make that diak. But if you hold Yesh Zika, so they would actually say, no, that's not what the Mishnah means. It doesn't mean only in a situation where Maimer was done. Even if Maimer was not done, still Shniyam Michatz Cholos Yibum Yavma. We still would not allow him to do Yibum because of this strong connection of the Ereva, and therefore the Tsaras Ereva would not be able to do Yibum. But again, because at least it was only Kedusha Rabban of Maimer, so Chalitza must be done. Tani Maimer. So why does it say Maimer? Well, say a Chiddush. It's Lafukim Beishamai. The Amri Maimer Kaina Kinyan Gomer Kamash Mulan. According to the Shita by Beishamai, he says that's a Kinyan Gomer, and she wouldn't even have to do Chalitza according to that Shita because it's like a real Kinyan. Kamash Mulan, we don't hold like that. So by us a question. Shnei Achen Ba'olam Echad. So you have two brothers, and they were alive at the same time. Reuven and Shimon, they knew each other, and Reuven had a wife. Umeis Achen Mehem B'loy Vlad, and Reuven died without children. Ba'amad Hasheni Hazel Lasos Maimer B'Yavimtoi. So Shimon says, you know what? I'm not going to do Yibum on the Shemer Shabbat. I'm just going to do this Kedusha Rabban of Maimer. However, Hispik Lasos B'Maimer, he didn't end up doing Maimer. Ad Shenoilad Lo Ach. And then all of a sudden, there's another brother. Levi was born. So he didn't do anything yet, but Levi was not alive at the time of Reuven at all. But Shimon did not yet do Mimer, he didn't do Yibum. Umes. And then this brother who was going to do Mimer, he also died. So now what's the din by Levi? So Harishona, when it comes to this first woman, so certainly she there's no din Yibum or Chalitza because she at the time when she was Zokuk to Shimon, Levi wasn't alive yet. Ushnia, however, the second woman, the Tzara, it says that Levi can do Chalitza or Yibum. Now, Zika, this is referring to Shimon's wife. So if there's a din of Zika, so how do you explain this pshat? It doesn't make any sense. If you hold Yesh Zika, then it's Tzaras Erev, and you shouldn't have to do it. Not only not Yibum, but not even Chalitza. So, but here it says you can do Yibum also. So Hamani Rab Meir Hidi Amr Ein Zika. You're right. We're gonna be no choice but to establish that this is specifically referring to the shita of Rab Meir, who does not hold of Zika. I misvir le Rab Meir in Zika. Is that really what Rab Meir holds? I batanan. But we learned in a Mishnah later on, Arba Achim. You have 4 brothers: Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. Now, Shnaim mehen nesuin shtei achayos. 2 of them married 2 sisters. So let's say Shimon and Levi married 2 sisters, Rachel and Leah. Umesu hanesuin hachayos. And those 2 brothers, Shimon and Levi, died. So now Shimon's wife and Levi's wife are now both a Shomer Shabam to Reuven and Yehuda, who are still alive. Now, the issue again is that both these women are sisters. So the din is like this. We will say that they will not do chalitz, they will only do chalitz, but not yibum, because of the issue of Eshes Aches Zekukasoi. Because the 2 women who are Zokuk are sisters. So there's an issue of Achlis Zekukasai, and therefore for that reason we say the din is they only do Chalitz. Now this is the sheet of Rameir. Now Rameir really holds in Zika, that there's not any strong connection. So Hani Mitrei Bati Kasyan, they're coming from 2 different houses, these 2 different brothers. Reuven and Yehuda are 2 different places. Hai liabim chada, v'hai liabim chada. Let each one just do Yibum. What's the problem? Let Reuven do Yibum with one, and let Yehuda do Yibum with the other. So, Ilchaira, that should be allowed. Why would he not allow that? Why do we say it's Achli Seku Kasai? It's because we hold Yesh Zika. But we just established Rameir holds Ein Zika. Olam Ein Zika. Mishum Diksavar Asal Vatim Mrs. Yavmin. The problem is that there's a potential thing, which we'll discuss in a second in this case, that if you do Yibum with one, then there's a possibility that the other women will not have anything, that Yibum or even Chalitza done to them. How's that possible? The Dilma Adami Yavim Chad Mais Iduch. Maybe what happens if while Reuven was about to do Yibum, he didn't do it yet, he was planning on it, and all of a sudden Yehuda also dies. Now he had Shimon and Levi died, and all of a sudden Yehuda now dies. So what's the problem? If he already did Yibum with one of the sisters, and then all of a sudden Yehuda, who's going to do Yibum with the other sister, but now he's dead, but you still have this woman who's Zokuk, become Batas Mrs. Yevamot. Since it's the wife's sister, it's Achazuku Kasai. And therefore, because of this possible scenario, we don't want Reuven to do Yibum. Because what happens if his other brother dies right away? And then, before this other woman was able to even get Chalitz or anything. So where it says, okay, the Ein Zika Tibatel, that what? If you hold Ein Zika, so we're going to be Mavatal Mitzvah Yavmin. The Ha Rabbi Gamliel Omer Ein Zika. According to Rabbi Gamliel, we see he holds Ein Zika. Umutul Vatal Mitzvah Yavamin. And he says it's not a problem. You could still be Mavatal Mitzvah Yavamin. It's not something you have to concern yourself with. Because we learned. Rabbi Gamliel Omer, he says as follows. Im mi'aina, mi'aina. If you do mi'in, you do mi'in. Bi'ulu mi'aina. If not, if she doesn't do mi'in and walk out of the marriage, tamtin you should wait ad shetagdil, until they grow up. The teitze helizu mishum achas isha. What is this case? So this is an important Rashi. Rashi says it's talking about shnei achin nesuin shtei achayos. You have two brothers, and they marry two sisters. Reuven and Shimon are married to Rachel and Leah. Achas gedolah v'achas katana. Let's call Leah the gedolah, and Rachel is a katana, which means she was literally, it was maybe not even a kedusha deraisa, that the katana is able to walk out of this marriage and do miyun. Umeis bala shel gedolah, and Reuven, who was married to Leah, died. So now v'nafel lifnei bal hakatana. So now, because Reuven died, so Shimon is supposed to marry Leah. But the problem is, of course, is that Shimon is also married to Rachel. But of course, Rachel, as a katana, she could just walk out of the marriage. So on this, says Rashi, Melamdan as a katana, lima'in, bebal v'akar nisuaseha kedei liyavim es zu, shezikasa shel zu chamura, la'eser hakatana lav shol hayin nisiyeha gemura, shema tima'in. So what do we say? We encourage this girl to walk out of the marriage. It's katana, Rachel. Because once she walks out, that means it was never a marriage. And since it was never a marriage, so now Shimon is able to marry, the Shemeres Yovam is able to marry Leah. Rabbi Gamliel Omer, mi aina. If miyun is done, so miyun is done. But tis yavem hagadoila, and yibum would be done with Leah. V'imlav, but let's say Rachel says, no, I'm not going to do miyun. So tamtin gedoila, so Leah has to wait as a shemeres yavam, ad shetagdil katana, until her sister grows up, v'yiboil, and she'll have bia with Shimon, via kedushin gemurin, and then the kedushin is no longer kedushin d'Rabbanan, it's now kedushin d'Oraisa, of a teitze gedoila mishum achas isha, and then only at that moment Leah no longer has any obligation. She's not a shemeres yavam because now it's achas isha. It's your it's an isser of your wife's sister. You can't do yibum on your wife's sister. Alma ein zika. It must be we don't hold of zika. Midishari katana leha. The fact that we allow the katana to do this, umutul levatal mitzvah yivamin, and to mevatal the mitzvah of yibum. Because what we're basically saying is that if she doesn't want to do mian, okay, she won't do mian, it's no problem. And then that means there'll be no yibum. Or Rameir nami isavar in zika, lema nami mutal vata mitzvah yavamin. L'chari he holds, again, you could be vata mitzvah yavamin. So l'chari we should say the same thing when we had, again, the case of the four brothers. Shimon and Levi die. So we said, oh, okay, we don't want Reuven to do Yibum, because what if Yehuda immediately afterwards dies? So then the other woman, who is the sister of Reuven's now marriage through Yibum, he won't be able to marry her. So because of that, you can only do Chalitza. Because otherwise, you'll end up being Mavatal Mitzvah Yavman. That's not something to be concerned about. So Armalei, there will be a Meir Karamis. Understand, you're asking a stira? Says Rashi, Nihi nami de zika sviril hu kiadadi b'yavam pligi. Fine, they may both agree ein zika. That doesn't mean that they have to agree when it comes to whether or not there's an issue being mavatal mitzvah yavamin. Lo yihachi kamrinan Rab Meir chayish afil esfeka. Rab Meir is chayish even when it comes to a doubt. Maybe he'll die. Rabbi Gamliel afil avadi lo chayish. However, according to Ramwil, even for a vadai, he's not concerned. So, again, how could these two opinions be at such extremes if both agree that in Zika? It's pretty hard to fathom. But that's what we're saying. Oh, they both hold in Zika, but one says we're chayish even if it's a total doubt, if he'll die. And the other one says even if it's a vadai, they're not chayish. It's kind of hard to imagine to such extremes. No, Dilmaman doli chayish. Maybe the one who's not chayish of this issue of being mavatal mitzvah yavmin, afil avada chayish. Uman de chayish, afil sfeika chayish. So Abai or Rabbi Yosef Hadar Behuda de Shmuelhi. That which Rabbi Yehuda says is actually the opinion of Shmuel, says Rashi, Mishmei de Shmuel, Rabbi, Shemielei, V'leimer Rav, Dahabi Nami Rabbi. We'll discuss what that is in a second before we turn the daf when we continue with Ditnan. So before, let's see question 7. Reuven v'Shimon achim. So Reuven and Shimon were brothers. Umeis Reuven b'Labanim, and Reuven died without children. Yachach noel Levi, and then we said that Levi was born. Yachach meis Shimon, and then Shimon dies. V'naflifnei Levi, Eishes Reuven v'Eishes Shimon. Madina shel Eishes Shimon l'chalitza libam. So certainly Eishes Reuven, there's nothing to talk about. That's considered to be Eishes. That's Eishes Ach shel hayabol lamoi. So the question is, what's the din of the tzara? So Laman Yomi, one who says yesh zika, that there's a zika, so chaletzes the havli tzaras Eishes Achiv shel hayabol lamoi bezika. Laman Yomi ein zika misyavemes. So this is what we said before. That again, this is a case where there was no mimer. So the situation, let's just see this inside. Shnei achen be'oyam echad u'meis echen mehem b'lovlan v'omad hasheni hazel lasos mimer, etc. So again, the question is, it says the shnia oichaletzes omis yavemes. Yibum, even yibum could be done, or we can say no. It's not necessarily the case. Only chalitza can be done if you hold yesh zika. Okay. So that would be another nafkamina where they hold yesh zika or ein zika in that situation. Okay. Okay. Question TA1. Let's just see these questions because they're all here. I don't want to get too far off. Ketzad eishes alcham shulhay belama asaba maimer mace. If mimer was done, so shnia hainu eishes hasheni chayletzes ma din below mimer madua. So one shot was if there was no mimer, so again some machlokas. Again, this is the case of if there was no mimer done. Yesh zika, if you hold that there's a zika the chaletzes. However, im ein zika misyavemes, which is basically the same question we just had. So again, it's totally on whether you hold yesh zika or ein zika. Fine. Let's see. Fine. TB3. Masvaras Rav Shimon ben Nolad v'achachiyavim. Okay, we're going to see that next Mishnah. Okay, Ditnan. So we learned in the Mishnah as follows. We just continue in Yechesed Beis. Shemeres Yavam. So you have again this woman whose husband died, childless. So she's a Shemeres Yavam. So she's waiting again. Rashi for some reason tells us what a Shemeres Yavam is here. Mamtenes liyibam Yevamot. So she's waiting. So what happened? She kiddush achav es achosa. So instead of the brother marrying her through Yibam, the guy does kiddushin and marries her sister. So Mishum Rabbi Yehuda ben Beser Amru Mulo, we say to him, to the one who did Erison, Hamtain, you should wait, says Rashi, Melichnais, to actually marry her, you only did kiddushin, Fisha Achos Kukoschahi, Ad Shiyasa Chicha Maisa. Wait until your other brother actually does Yibum, so that this way the other brother will do Yibum with the sister. And then once that's done, so then you can marry the girl that you already did Kedushin. They're sisters. So even though the Shomer Shalom was first in the picture before you married her sister, so just all you did was Kedushin. So don't do Nisuin, don't consummate the marriage. Instead, wait until your other brother, you have a third brother, one died, you have another brother who can now do Yibum, and then that's it. Yer Shmuel halacha Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Halacha is like him. So Armalei, so he said like this: D'i derav mai. So the question is, why do we wish to establish it like Shmuel and not like Rav? So Armalei kasha derav ad Rav. Dilma maroinin hu believe it Rav. Maybe so what? Maybe it's like Rav, and there's machlokas what Rav holds. But kivandi itmar mishmei de Shmuel. Since it was said in the name of Shmuel behedya umishmei de Rav ke'amoroi. Because of that, loishav kinam mishmei de Shmuel behedya umakminan ke'amoroi believe it Rav. Since it was said explicitly like Shmuel, so we're going to establish and say that is in fact who said it. It says Rashi, the Rav, the Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav. Le'el, he said before, in the name of Rab, mutter be'ima, which means that he holds ein zika. Amoroinin, who says Rashi, Rab Huna b'Rab Yehuda, Talmidid Rab Habi Upliga Libei. Okay. Rav Kahana, Amisa Lishmaisa Kameh, Rab Zvid. This was said in front of Zvid, Rab Zvid, Menharda. And he said, Atun Hakamas Nisan. This is how you learned it. Anan Behedyamas Nisan. We learned it explicitly. Behedya. Rav Yehuda, Shmuel. It was not Rav, it was Shmuel. It says it beferish, it wasn't Rav. And what did Shmuel say? Shemeres Yavim Shemesa. Again, the Shemeres Yavim who died. Aser be'ima. So we say that the din is that this man, the brother, cannot marry her mom because that's chamoisa. It's a mother-in-law. What do you mean it's a mother-in-law? He wasn't married to her. Yes, but there was a zika. Al Maksav yesh zika. Yos Shmuel tamei. Di'ar Shmuel halacha k'Rabbi Yehuda ben Masera. Tzricha. Di'ash min yesh zika. Habi min hadimil b'chad. Maybe the whole, as we saw before in yesterday's stuff, that the only time we say that the zika is so strong that he can no longer marry her mother even after she died is if there's only one brother. So obviously he is the one. If let's say there's two brothers, so maybe I don't have to marry her. I don't have to do yibum. My other brother can do the yibum, and then I'll end up simply marrying the mother afterwards. So we say no. Yesh zika is even in the situation of two brothers. You would think they could even do it while and marry her even while the Yevamot, the Shemeres Yavim, is still alive. Maybe the whole issue is only Mechayim. But once she died, it's no longer a problem because what's the zika? She's not alive. Which means that even if you hold the age zika, you could maybe think, okay, but maybe that's only while the Shemeres Yavim is alive. When she dies, maybe you could still marry the mother because you can't do yibum. She's dead. Doesn't make any difference that zika doesn't leave. The fact that the zika is almost like you're on some level already almost like a little bit married to her. Therefore, you can't marry the mother afterwards. Weiter. Next Mishnah. Masnisan. Shnei achin. You have two brothers. Umeisach mehen. So it's a typical situation. Reuven and Shimon. Reuven dies without children. And you have Shimon, who is now in the equation to do Yibum. And in fact, V'yabim Hasheni es Eish Sachiv. So this is what he does. He married his brother's wife, which is what Yibum is, which everything's fine. But the Achachach Noel Lehen Ach. Now all of a sudden, Levi is born. So in the Reisha, in the previous Mishnah, we had Levi that was born before Shimon did Yibum. Here, he only was born after Yibum was done. So he really was removed from the situation before he was born. Umeis, now Shimon died. So the din is like this. Harishona, the wife of Reuven, there's no question. So Levi certainly doesn't do Yibum with her because Reuven and Levi were not alive at the same time. So therefore, that is considered to be like an erva. Vashnia, however, Shimon's original wife, also Levi will not marry Mishum Tsarasa, because she's the co-wife of Reuven's wife. And therefore, Levi will not do Yibum with either of them. Now, let's see Asaba Maimer Mace. Let's say Shimon, again, what happened? Reuven died. Shimon, now, instead of doing Yibum, he decides to do Maimer. Umes, and now Shimon dies. And Hashnia, so again, it's the same thing. Then Levi is now around. So Hashnia choletzes on Misyavemes. Again, obviously the first one was nothing to talk about. The second wife, because it was only Kedusha to Rabbanan, so therefore she's not really a tzara because the other woman was not married midaraisa. So therefore, the brother Levi will still do chalitza. Shimon Omer miyavim le'ez mehen shiyirtze ochayos le'ez mehen shiyirtze. You can do Yibam or Chalitza to whomever he sees fit. Says Rashi. Upatura chaverta. And he'll pater the other one. V'lav asaba maimer koi. This is not talking about the case where maimer was done by Shimon. El arisha. It's talking about the first case. Diktani harishayna yatza etc. The Kemer of Shimon. The kivan. The kashinoilid kfar. Since he was born nisyavma. V'lo haisa al zeb bezikas nesuye achav harishon me'oil mutereslo. So the truth is, since he was born so far removed, only after Shimon married her, so it's not considered to be this connection to Reuven at all, because the marriage that Levi looks at was not the marriage that Reuven had, because Levi wasn't even alive at that time. Only afterwards, when Levi was born, he now sees, oh, my brother Shimon is married to this woman. So again, since Shimon did Yibum before Levi was ever born, so now it's like two regular wives of Shimon, who then dies, and Levi can perform Yibum regularly, and therefore he can decide to do Chalitz or Yibum to whomever he sees fit, according to that Shita, which again is obviously not like the opinion of the Tanakama. That's what Rav Shimon holds. Now, Rav Aishia Cholokai Rav Shimon Afri Shaina. Our mission is talking about where Levi was born after Shimon did Yibum. Now, the first mission talked about a situation where Levi was born before Shimon had a chance to do Yibum. So in that situation, maybe it's a little bit more problematic for Rav Shimon to be able to say that he can do Yibum or Chalitza with her, because this woman there was a Zika to Shimon, and he didn't do Yibum yet, and Levi was born. So on this, Rav Shimon holds that even if Levi is born before Shimon did Yibum, still the din is that Levi, upon Shimon's death, can do Chalitza Yibum to whomever he sees fit. Memai. Menetani Mishni Yasero. We have this extra statement. Beba Dereisha, Laman Katani, La'ileim L'Rabbanan. So the first case of the Rabban is according to the Rabbanan, right? So there's no Chiddush there. Hashti Yibim, Ubasav Noilad. In the situation where Yibum was done, and then Levi was born, the Chi Ashkacha, Bater Ashkacha, because even the truth is, he found her beheter, because Reuven had already died, and she already had done Yibum with Shimon. Nonetheless, Aser Rabbanan, the Rabbanan, even in that situation will Aser. So no Vachach Yibim boy. There's no Chiddush in this case. Obviously, if you have the case of Noilad, that Levi was first born, and then afterwards Yibum, then certainly the Rabbanan are going to Aser. So the case of the Reisha seems quite self-evident that there's no Chiddush in the Reisha according to the Rabbanan. Elvav Rav Shimon is Itzrich. The reason why we mention it is in the Reisha is to say this is actually according to Rav Shimon, that even Rav Shimon is chaylik in that situation. Even in a situation where Levi was born before Shimon did Yibum, still Levi has the right to be able to do Yibum to either of them when Shimon dies. V'tana Reishal Hadicha Chachad Rav Shimon. So the Chiddush of the Reisha is Rav Shimon, that even in that situation where Levi was born before Shimon did Yibum, and then Shimon dies, he can still do Chalitza Yibum to whomever. V'tana Seva Chachad Rabbanan. And this Mishnah right here is to show the Kayach of the Rabbanan, that even when Levi was born afterwards, after Shimon did Yibum, he still can't do Chalitza or Yibum with them. The truth is, instead of mentioning Rav Shimon here, it would have been better that Rav Shimon should have argued in the Reisha. He waited until they finished all of their discussion. And then he mentions the machlokas over here. But it's not because he only argues here. He's chalok also in the Reisha too. If it's true, as we were just saying, that Rav Shimon does not hold that there's an issue of Eishes Achashal Ha'Belamo in the situation where Levi is born before Shimon does Yibum, or in the case where Levi is born after Shimon does Yibum. That's not considered Eishes Achiv Shulhai B'Lama, because he still holds Levi could still do Yibum with her. So then, but there is a case we established there were psukim, Yachtav and the like. So how could he say this? Where do we find a situation of a case of Eishes Achiv Shulhai B'Lama? So the answer is B'chad Acha. There's only one brother. One brother. It's not two. It's not Reuven and Shimon. You have Reuven and Levi, but Levi's not born yet. All you have is Reuven. Umeis, Reuven dies, V'nod Lulach, and only afterwards Levi is born. So in that situation, even Rav Shimon would hold that situation, Reuven would not do Yibum. Inami, another situation, is betray V'yibim V'yomis, V'omeis. if let's say you have two brothers, Reuven and Shimon, V'lo Yibim, Shimon just never did Yibum, she's a Shemer Shalbam, V'lo Meis, and Shimon did not die. So the Zika of Reuven remains to Shimon. So Levi is born later, but the truth is that Shimon is the one who's supposed to do there's a Zika to him, because Levi wasn't born when Reuven died. So if that's the case, so the person who should be marrying this first woman, this Shemer Yavam, is Shimon. Shimon's waiting for whatever reason, so that's still a case. Fine. Now, before we continue with Bishlomo, let's see question 8. Masvaris or Shimon, what's the svar of Rav Shimon? Benoilad v'achach yavim, that Levi was born, and then only afterwards Shimon did Yibum. Aliba de Rabbi Oisha dechol kayar Shimon apri shaina. So why do we say, what is the svara that we say that Levi still is able to do Yibum in that situation, even though he was born first and then Shimon did Yibum? So it's because he holds Yesh Zika. He's of the opinion that there is a Zika to Shimon, and the Zika kikanusa b'chad yavam b'havile kiyibum mosev noilad. So he says that it's the Zika is to Shimon, and therefore it's similar to the case of Yibum and then afterwards noilad. That's the idea behind this. So even though it's true, you would say, well, he was born first, but because it was a Zika to Shimon, so therefore it's Ki'ilu, like she was connected specifically to Shimon, and therefore it's almost like Yibum was done and then he was born, even though that's not what happened. She was a Shemer Yavam, and then he was born, and then Shimon did Yibum. But because of this Zika, so it's almost Ki'ilu like they were actually married, and therefore it's comparable to a case of Yibum and then Levi is born. Now, I can understand if Yibum was done and then Levi was born afterwards. So again, when Levi was born, it was beheter. So Ella Yibim, my taima, which is what we just saw over here. So it's very hard to understand. How is it possible that Rav Shimon is so lenient? The answer is right? So it's like, I'm writing this down, Shimon did Yibum before Levi was born, which is not the case, but because of the Zika, due to Yesh Zika, it's almost like they were married, and therefore it's like they were married, and then afterwards he was born. Maskav Rav Yosef Hashta, now Zika, that there's this strong Zika to Shimon, Umaimer Mesavkele, or Rav Shimon, and what he said when it comes to Maimer, which is a Kedusha Rabbanan, there's this doubt. So Ika Kanusa Damya, if it's true that, okay, he didn't, let's say he's about to do Maimer, but the truth is that even before he did Maimer, we're saying that's Kiyul like they're married, so Ilav Kikanusa Damya Zika Chudimiboy. I understand. The very fact that they have this strong Zika, they're considered to be married enough that, again, it's Keilu like the brother was born afterwards. So then how come Maimer, which is an action, that we say it's different? So Mai, what is this? Did not. Shloisha Achin Nesuin. Shlosh Nashim Nechariyos. You have Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. And they married three totally unrelated women. They're not, these three women had no connection to one another. So Reuven died. So now you have this first woman that is a Shemer Shavam. Now Shimon did Maimer, and then Shimon dies. So now Shimon has a wife that he was married to, and then he also has this other wife from Reuven, which he did Maimer with. So Hari Elu Levi Choltzos Lomis Yevamos. According to him, he says that Levi can only do Chalitza and not Yibum. Why? Shnemer Umeis Achmehen. It says that one of the brothers dies. Yevama Yavu Aleha. So you're supposed to do Yibum. Mi Sha'aleha Zika Yavam Echad. That's only when there's only one Zika. Below Shaleh Zika Shnei Yavamin. Not when you have two. So there. What does that mean? So there is a Zika of Reuven and Shimon. Since Shimon did Mimer, so she's still connected to both of them. Since Mimer is quasi and it's not complete, it's not a full marriage. So it's, even though Shimon did something, but it's not enough. Mimer is not enough. There's still therefore this element of a Zika connected to Levi, and therefore, since there is a Zika to Shimon from Shimon's wife and from Reuben's original wife, so therefore he only we say that he will do chalitza only. Shimon Omer miyavim le'esim mehem sheyirtza. No, he could do yibum with one, and then after he does yibum with one, v'chalitza shniya, he'll do chalitza with the other one. Yavumi tirvayu lo. He's not going to allow you to do yibum with both these wives, so why not? Because the dilma yesh zika. Maybe the mimer, together with the mimer, there was a zika strong enough with Shimon, and therefore v'havi shnei yevamos haboyis mebayis echad. It's considered to be like two yevamos that come from one house, and therefore, if that's the way that it would be, as we continue to Testament Aleph, says Rashi, Rachmana Omar as base achiv. Base echad hu boneh, deinu boneh shnei batim. So you only marry one, not two. So if mimer is actually strong enough, so Shimon was absolutely married to one woman. He did mimer, so if mimer is strong enough that with Zika, it's keel like he was actually really married, so then, according to this, at that point we will say you can't do yibum with both because you can't build both houses. You can't marry both of them. So Yevumi Chada, instead you do Yibum with one of the two. The Ifter Idoch, lo. But to say the other one doesn't have to, nothing, we don't allow, because Dilma Ein Zika, Knusa. Maybe there's no real connection. And therefore, V'havilhu Shtei Yevamos Habois Mishtei Batim. Maybe it's two Yevamos that are coming from two different houses, from Reuven and from Shimon. In other words, maybe the Zika of Reuven's wife was really not that strong, and therefore she can't just walk away because there's still a connection to this brother. Alma Masafkale. So we see a suffix by mimer. So how could it be, even without mimer, the Zika alone is so strong that it's like there's a marriage? How's that possible? If again, even when it comes to with mimer, we see a suffix of. So how can it be without mimer that it's ki'ilu like they were married? So and therefore it's like they were married before, and then Levi was born later, even though Levi was born first. Oh, because of the strong Zika. What do you mean? Even with mimer, there's a question. Maybe you're right. Maybe it just means like this. Midaraisa, you're supposed to do yibum with one, and maybe the other one tak is free. And with Rabbanan the aser, the Rabbanan say no. We want you to at least do chalitza with the other one because gezer mishum shema yomer beis yevamos abos mishtei batim. Because maybe they're from two different brothers, so this is a gezerah. But you're right, mikra hadin is not the case because it really may not mean anything. So chadam miyavma, one do yibam yidach miftara bevloy klum. So b'hatayim dar Shimon misham mimer v'la misham mimerhu. The whole reason Rav Shimon has to do is connected to doing mimer or not. Desanya. Armul Rav Shimon l'chachamim, he said, Ima amr shel sheni, if the mimer of the second one of Shimon that he did, again, Reuben died, and then instead of Shimon marrying and doing yibam with Reuben's wife, he did mimer. So if that actually meant anything, that's a mimer, then Eishes Sheni hu boil. So the Eishes Sheni is boil. The Mamar Shel Sheni Einu mimer. There was nothing. The Eishes Rishon hu boil, right? So it's really only one Zika. So again, we clearly see Rav Shimon is in doubt, even in the case of doing mimer. So you tell me that he doesn't make a distinction. Rav Shimon Zika kanusa. Maybe the only time he says that there's a Zika is so strong that it's keel like they're married is biyavam echad, is if there's only one man in the picture, and then again afterwards, they have Levi born afterwards. But when there's two Yevamim, maybe he does not say that. Okay, we'll stop here. Let's see if there's another question. Okay, a lot of the questions seem very similar, so it's hard to navigate as to what the questions are. Question 2: Shnei achim, umeis echad, 2 brothers. One of them, Reuben, died. Also, Hasheni Maimer. Shimon did Maimer. V'achach noyulad lehem ach, and then Levi is born after Umeis Sheni, and then Shimon dies. Ha'im balos haMaimer o Eishas Hasheni misyavemes Rav Shimon umadua umaskana. So balos haMaimer, the one who did Maimer, Shimon, enu misyavemes, doesn't do Yibum. De'im Maimer enu kaina. If the Maimer is nothing, tabli Eishas Yishul Hoy Balomo. The Eishas Hasheni misyavemes memanoshach. The Maimer kani havali Yibum yachach noilad. The Maimer lo kani hari eno sar l'rishayna. Okay, it's a little bit confusing, but l'char, that's what we just saw. Okay, question TB3. Masvars Rav Shimon ben noilad v'achach Yibum l'rishayna d'chol kol Rav Shimon ap rishayna. I think I just had this, but that was question 8. I guess it's the same one. That TB3 is, again, it's Ki'ilu, right? He says, Yesh Zika v'Zika Kanasua b'chad Yavam. He says in parentheses, maybe that's only when there's only one Yavam. V'havili ki Yavam l'sayv noilad. So that's what we're basically saying over here, l'maskana. We're saying that maybe the only time we say this din, it's the Zika is so strong that it's Ki'ilu that Shimon actually almost did Yibum, even though he didn't, and therefore it's Ki'ilu like that Levi was actually born afterwards, even though he was born before the actual Yibum took place, is only when Shimon was the only brother. So it's so clear that he was the one that was supposed to do Yibum. It's Kikanusa. That Zika is so strong, it's like he was actually married to her. However, in the case of 2 Yevamot, which is two brothers that are alive, totally alive at the time of Reuven, and then so either one of them could have done, could be doing Yibum. So therefore the Zika in that case may be not as strong, and therefore we would not say that Levi born first, it's Ki'ilu like he was born afterwards. We only say that when we have one brother, that we know for sure he was supposed to do it. But if you have more than one brother, so Lav Dafka, then we're not going to say such a thing. I'd come.